and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. I'm going to start off by playing a song that's actually a march. You know the differences probably when you're listening to march music, waltz music, just regular 4/4 time or whatever time the song is written in. And I wrote this up yesterday, and I'd been listening to music, and I got an idea for a song, and so I just wrote this up. This would be, I'm not going to play it too fast. It's in the key of 2 sharps. And if you want to watch it, if it's on this side of my notebook here, and you can kind of follow it as I'm playing and see if you have any trouble in following along. But anyway, if we can kind of skip, yeah, good, thank you, that's good. Okay, this is a march, just remember it. Normally I would play it faster. I want you to catch the music and follow the music if you can, so I'm not going to be playing it that fast, but normally it would go faster. It's in the key of D, which means it has 2 sharps. So let's start with that. Now I'm going to try playing it faster. I want you still to look at that. This would be more close to what I would like to play it, but I want to play it slower to begin with. So let's start off, and I'm going to do this a little faster. You notice that last note, I shortened it. When you get a little note, and I'm going to show you that, when you get a little note that's with a little dot on it, that's a staccato note, and that shortens the note. And so a lot of marches do have it, and if it's separate by itself, it's called a stinger. That's what it's called. Well, let's take a look. This is what I was asking you to watch right here. Let's go over to this side. I want to see how I could mark that up to make that clearer if you were just beginning and you wondered about it. All right, here's your key signature, 2 sharps. That's in the key of D, C sharp and F sharp. You know, it's interesting that if a music is in a certain key, like the key of G, it has 1 sharp, but G is not the note that's sharp. And in the key of D, D has 2 sharps, but D is not the key that's sharp. You know, because it has to do with the whole notes and half notes and how they are and how they space each other out. So sometimes the sharps and flats are not the ones that the key says it is in terms of the title of the key. So here we have a full rest, and here we have an A, and this is a dotted 8th and 16th. I have several of them, and in here I put the note A, and I put the note F sharp, I put the note B. This is a hold right here. These holds you have to have because otherwise you'd be tonguing everything and that wouldn't sound good. And then there's a little breath mark here. And then you go to another dotted 8th, 16th. The dotted 8th and 16th is actually 1 beat. It doesn't look like it, but it's one beat. And the dotted eighth is actually 3 times faster than the 16th, which it's attached to. So you get that da 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 da. You know, so if I were to play this, and I'm just going to do this just to show you, a dotted eighth and 16th. If I wasn't doing the dotted eighth and 16th, then I would be doing 2 eighth notes. So the difference is the second time I was just doing eighth notes, but when you make that dotted 16th, it give it an extra rhythm there. And that's very important because there's lots of music where you get that da 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 da, which you need to get for the music's sake. And if you didn't, you'd be playing just da 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 da. It would be more boring, wouldn't be quite as good. So it's just something to consider here. So I decided to put the dotted eighths and 16ths in. And I wanted to show you, here we go, a hold, a breath note, right, a breath mark right here, and where you breathe. And this is a hold right here, followed by a breath mark. Usually you're going to take your breathing after a phrase, before a phrase, or just as you're starting a new phrase. So if I'm playing it from the beginning, I have a breath mark right here. I go from this A, this certain group of notes, and then there's a breath mark before I start the next phrase. Now you can take a breath anytime that you need it. But the thing is, you don't want to interfere with the flow of the music. So there's ways of breathing where you have all the air that you need, because I took several breaths as I was playing it, but it wouldn't be obvious where I was doing it, because I would be doing it in a place where I'm not interrupting a note. Unless, of course, I needed to have air very quickly, and then I would just have to do it. Otherwise, you'd pass out or something. But you do it in such a way that you don't have a lot of interruption of the notes. And I started by writing down, like, this is an A, and this is a B. I didn't go too far with it, because so much extra stuff and the music kind of makes it confusing, and I don't think it's necessary to do all of that, but you do have to have all of those things, that the markings that you have to have, key changes when you're going loud and soft, and that's called dynamics. The dynamics of the music is when you play it loud, or when you play it soft, or when you play it medium. That's all marked out. That you need to pay attention to. But the name of the notes, A, B, C, whatever, the breath marks, things like that, you usually don't put in. You do put in the rehearsal markings, as I mentioned before in the last episode, although I don't think I put them in here, so that if you were playing in an orchestra and you were rehearsing, that you'd be able to say, a conductor would say, well, let's go back to G, because sometimes you use letters instead of numbers, but you can use rehearsal markings as either letters or numbers. It really doesn't make any difference as long as you know what they are. I think the numbers are better, because when you start putting in letters, it kind of mimics the notes, because the notes are based upon, like, the alphabet A through G. And if you have that as a rehearsal marking, that could get a little confusing. So I think the use of the numbers is better. But it's very handy to have that. You need your dynamic signs, whether loud or soft, or any retard or key changes. There are things that you really have to have. And music is a language, and you need to understand it as a language. And when you see the signs, you see DSL sign, you know what that means, and you know where to go. You see repeat signs, you know where that is, you know where to go. And so those things are very, very necessary. As far as putting in phrases and breath marks, I usually don't bother. And some notes, I didn't put it on here, but some songs, they will actually give you a little graph that tells you what the lowest note is and what the highest note is. And that would be placed, I did it on the other song for last segment, but I didn't talk about it then. But you would have a little graph, it would be here, and you'd have a little bit of a staff. The lowest note would be on the staff, and the highest note would be on the staff, and that tells you the range of all of the music. You also would have a number, they're like 70 or 60, and that tells you what the beat is, how fast it goes, and you can get a metronome that actually does the beats for you, so you can get a sense of where that is and how fast it's supposed to go. So you can put all kinds of stuff on it, and it's kind of important. One thing you have to do is to be able to read the music. So what I want to do now is just to tell you about how I teach, and I'm going to make a switch here and put this down. This is how I teach children, but I teach adults too because it works out. It's real easy, an easy way to know how to read time. Because with a song like I just played, you've got to know what your dotted eighths and sixteenths are. You have to know where your half notes, your quarter notes, and you have to have the time signature. Are you playing in cut time? Are you playing in 2/2? Are you playing in 4/4? Whatever the timing is. And so you have to understand what all that means. When you have a sign that says you need to retard, what does that mean? RIT period. How slow do you go? If you have a fermata or a hold, what does that mean? How long do you hold a note? It is a language, and there are signs and symbols all over the music that teaches you and that shows you exactly how you should play. But one thing you have to know is you have to be able to count the time. And I know there are a lot of people that have real difficulty with this. I've had students that are very difficult for them to learn how to count time. And you have to do it internally, because with a woodwind, you have an instrument in your mouth basically, and you can't just count it out. I know piano teachers will sometimes take students and say, count this. As you're playing it, count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is that you need to have them counted. And then they get to know very clearly how the music goes and what the timing is. So what I want to do is just show you the basics of and review of getting the time right and knowing how to read time. So this is my method. I call it my donut method. And as you can see, I have here a picture of a sugar donut. Now, how did I get that picture? My sister asked me that. Well, it was simple. I was working in an organization that had a photocopier, its own photocopier, and I bought myself a box of a dozen sugar donuts. You can't buy just one or two, you've got to have the whole box. And I actually took a donut and I put it on the photocopier, and then I lowered the cover as much as I could without squishing the donut and took a picture. And I had a regular full-size picture. Now, this is an enlargement, but that's okay. I wanted it enlarged. This is a donut. And that donut represents the whole. It is a circle. It is basically filled in except for the center, and that represents our whole. Now, imagine that you're an 8-year-old child. Here's your whole donut. This is the original size of the donut, I think. And that represents the whole. One whole, the whole thing. And to do this, you have to understand fractions. Now, if you were to hold that as a musician, that's going to be counted to 4. Now, that's the whole, and it's a representation of this whole donut. And when you hold it for 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you make subdivisions in that whole, and you make subdivisions in the donut. If you cut that donut in half, you have 2 halves of the donut. And then that 2 halves, is going to equal a whole. Well, here are your 2 halves. This is a half note, and this is a half note. The body of the note is clear, and it has a stem on it. and two of them equal a whole. So you have your two halves equaling a whole. Real smart, right? That's how you do it. Here's two halves of the donut. If you were to put them together, you would have a whole donut. These two halves, if you were just to take the stem off and use one note, you'd have that whole. So two halves make a whole. That's just basic mathematics. Well, supposing you want quarter notes, you cut that donut again. You cut it in 4 pieces. Now, you see, the whole would be all 4 pieces together. So what we have is 4 quarters. That donut is now in 4 quarters. And I took 4 quarters, and you make quarter notes. Now, the quarter notes look a little different. The quarter notes are dark, they're black, or whatever color you want, and they all have stems. So therefore, 1, 2, 3, 4 is 4 quarters. 4 quarters equals a whole. Here we have a donut in 4 quarters. That 4 quarters equals a whole. So 4 quarters equals a whole note. 2 halves equal a whole note. And so you get your halves and your wholes that way. You know what my sister thought I did? She says, how did you ever cut the donut and make the edges so even? I never saw anyone able to do that. And after I had my fit of laughing, I said, you know, I didn't cut the donut. I did it with a pair of scissors. I made a ton of these images of the donut, and then I just used a ruler and I cut. I cut into an image, into a photocopied image. I didn't cut the donut into 4 parts because it would be crumbly and it would be a mess. Oh, I never thought of that. Well, how else would you do it? I thought it was pretty funny. So you have your quarters. Now, if you go over here, now you want eighths. You cut the quarters in half, and what do you get? You get eighths. You get 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what I did is I just took a ruler and drew that in. But you have eighth notes. Now, an eighth note is a half of a quarter note, you know. A quarter note is 1, and it takes 2/8 to make a quarter. So here's the way you write an eighth. You have the body of the note. You have a stem, and you put 1 flag on it. Every time you put these little markings on the side, regardless of what direction the note is in, that's your flag. Here's the stem, here's the flag. Here's the stem, here's the flag. All of these eighth notes, those are all stems. That line across acts as a flag for all of them. Or you can do it in 2s. There's 2 notes, and they have that mutual flag, or 4. So you've got 8. So it takes 8 of them to make a whole. It takes 2 halves to make a whole. It takes 4 quarters to make a whole. And it takes eighth notes to make a whole. And they look like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And you get that. So if you use that donut, or any circular thing, I thought about doing it with a pizza, but I'm not going to put a pizza on a photocopier, and I'm not going to take it from the box of a package, because then I'd be breaking copyright laws. What better way than take a donut? I mean, who else photocopies a donut? Well, I have a copyright sign on this, so it's my donut. And so that's the way you just keep cutting and cutting and subdividing and subdividing. If you want to subdivide it further, you could have 16ths. Look at this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There are 16 parts, which I used a ruler for. Now, the 16th note has 2 flags instead of 1. If you take your single note, here is the second flag. If you take, it can go in a different direction, 2 flags. You can have 2 notes, and you have 2 lines instead of 1. Those are 2 flags. Anything with 2 flags becomes a 16th note. You have just split that donut into an impossible 16-piece donut, okay? And so here you have 1 beat, a second beat, a third beat, a fourth beat. Each beat has 4 notes and 2 flags. The 16th note, it takes 4 of them to make 1 beat. But if you want 4 beats, you have to have 4 of them. Okay? Or you can have 4, that's 1 beat, or 2 eighth notes, which is another beat, or 1 quarter note, which is another beat. So that's 16th. Now it can even go further than that, because although I'm not sure how much I have drawn out in terms of 32nd notes, I may not have taken it that far. So, but we started with the whole. Here it is, the whole. Then we have the 2 halves. There they are, the half notes, 1 stem each. 2 make a whole. Then we have the quarters, 4 makes the whole. Then we have the eighths, which is 8, and then we could get, if I took it that far, I don't think I did, the 16th, but you could go further than that. You can have 32nd notes, you can have 64th notes. You keep subdividing more and more and more. Now, we won't be getting into that. That gets to be complicated. We're not going to get into that here. But if you can imagine dividing a donut into 34 parts or 32 parts, that now you're really getting a subdivision. It would be hard to draw that out. So here we go. A whole note, 1, 2, 3, 4 beats. A half note, 1, 2, 3, 4, just 2 beats each. Then you have the quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you have the eighth notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you have the stems, and this is all a flag. This line is all a flag. Then you have the 16th notes, which is a further subdivision, 4 16ths to 1 beat. This would be 1 beat, 2 beats, 3 beats, 4 beats. So how do you count that? Well, when I get more time, we're about out of time here, so I'm not going to be able to go any further with this. But as you can see, whole, halves, quarters, eighths, 16ths. Half, which equals 2 quarters, which equal 4 eighths, which equals 8 16ths. Now I'm going to take this further, but I won't be able to do it today because we're just about out of time. So I'm going to close it here, and we're going to continue to work on theory and basics of music. It does become very mathematical. But you can figure it out. You know, it's something that you can figure out. When you put it in the genre of here's a piece of pizza or here's a donut, let's just subdivide, it starts to make more sense that way. So I think even adults can learn to count music this way. And then there's lots of applications of that. The dotted eighths, the dotted 16th, the dotted quarters. You know, what does that mean? I plan to go on with this further. So when we get more time. So we'll close it here. We'll continue next time. Please join me then.